Hi guys, how you doing? Right, second video I thought I'd send you now that we're starting, only about a week. So I thought obviously the first video was just a basic one of like some things to consider about squatting and foot position and things like that. So hopefully you've had a wee shot of practicing that in the house. We'll go over it obviously at the sessions, but it's just to give you a wee head start of like what to expect before you actually come in. This video is a wee bit more in depth. Okay, so this is going to cover two really quite fundamental points that are going to make a big difference to your training experience really over the next 16 weeks. Don't worry if you don't get this first time. Okay, again, the idea is that you can maybe practice it a wee bit first. And it gives you a chance to sort of familiarise yourself with some of the main coaching points that we'll be looking for in pretty much every exercise. So the first one actually is something called the hip hinge. Okay, so in the first video we covered like the basics of squatting, okay, which essentially requires you to bend your knee and your hip simultaneously. Most folk find squatting quite straightforward, I would say, because it uses the quads quite a lot, and most folk don't really have much of an issue working their quads or getting their quads active, to the extent whereby the quads quite often overwork and do too much of the work at the expense of the glute muscles and the hamstrings. If you think about it, any sort of exercise that involves like lunging or squatting or stepping up or cycling, like spin classes are very popular. So all these types of exercise are all fine and good, but they primarily they're quite quad dominant or they're quite knee dominant, because in other words the knee has to bend quite a lot to perform the movements. On the other hand, to work your hamstrings at the back of your leg and your glutes, it requires a lot more involvement of the hip area, okay? And what we want to try and do with the hip hinge is to try and take the quads out of the equation a wee bit, which basically means to not bend our knees as much, okay? So a hip hinge movement, okay, which you'll need, which is the basis of a lot of exercises, particularly an exercise called the stiff leg deadlift, is this movement here. So the idea is that you hinge at the hip. So here's your hip here. Pretend this is the hinge, okay, of your body, and the idea is that you perform this movement. So essentially the hip hinge is almost like your torso or your upper body coming over the top of your lower body. So in other words, there's not that same amount of knee bend that you get in a squat. So that's a squat obviously, but in this case all the movement comes via the hip, okay, and the knees stay only partially bent throughout the movement. So that there is the hip hinge movement, okay, and it's the hamstrings that are the primary muscles that are working during the hip hinge. The problem with the hip hinge is a lot of folks struggle to get it right, or they really struggle to master it. So in other words, it does take practice. So this is one reason why I'm going to ask you to practice it at home. You cannot and should not expect to, unless you've trained before, expect to just get this in the first session or two, or even 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. It's something that can take a good sort of month of practice. So this would be an example, I suppose, of like this. You'll get out of the sessions as much as what you put into them. So the more you kind of practice it, the quicker you pick it up, and then you'll be able to get more out of the actual exercises within the certain sessions that involve this movement. So basically, the easiest way to learn it, I would suggest, well, there's a few methods, but one way is to use some sort of like feedback cue, like a bit of wood in your house, right? So grab a bit of wood or like this, or even a brush, and just take off the handle. You can keep the handle on, but you can take a brush, and what you're going to do is you're going to put it here, okay, in the middle of your back, okay, and the objective is that if you're going to do a correct, if you've got really good solid posture, that the back of the stick might even, if your neck's in a really nice perfect position, the back of the stick might even hit your head. Most of us aren't that blessed, right, especially from sitting down a lot and hunching over, but essentially the stick should be touching your backside and your mid-back in between the shoulder blades, okay, and it should be quite close to the back of your head as well. So you just hold it in place, okay. From there, the objective is to make, and this will help to ensure that you're doing it correctly. You can film yourself doing it if you want, is to perform that hip hinge which I just explained, and throughout the movement the piece of wood here should remain in constant contact with the sort of the top of your backside and your mid back, like like so. Okay, if you come over far enough, you might actually be able to balance it. Okay, so if you're doing the hip hinge incorrectly, which a lot of folk do, they round the lower back and it looks like this. So they'll go to pick the weight up and they'll do this, and obviously the upper part of the stick comes away from the upper back. And that's immediately, it's almost giving you feedback to say you're doing it wrong. So when you tell someone to pick something, or when we tell someone to pick a weight off the floor, for example, the automatic response is usually just to do this and bend down. And all that does is it doesn't really load up the hamstrings or glutes correctly, and it puts a lot of increased pressure through the lower back, and that's why a lot of folk end up with back pain. So what you need to know when it comes to sort of weight training is that in nearly all cases, if you get like a sore back from weight training, it's not the weights that are the problem, it's the technique. So it means you're probably lifting it incorrectly, and in most cases that is what folk do. In terms of lifting incorrectly, they perform deadlifts like this. Okay, so they'll come up and down. There'll be no consideration to keeping a strong lower back, a strong lumbar spine, and there'll be no consideration to keeping the upper back muscles engaged. So practicing this in the house can really help achieve that. Okay, so you can just put one hand on it if you want, and literally just come up and down. So you keep your knees, don't keep your knees locked straight, have them slightly bent. Okay, to begin with, chest out. You want to keep your core engaged. This is another thing we're going to go over in a wee minute. So make sure your bum isn't sticking out too excessively. You shouldn't be able to put a huge big hand between here. Okay, there shouldn't be a big massive gap. There will be a small gap, but there should not be a big massive gap. If there is, that means that you're doing something called hyperextension of the lumbar spine, which again is going to cause back pain. So you need to make sure that you're engaging your abs by drawing this in. Now again, as soon as you do that, automatically what a lot of folk tend to do is they tend to round their shoulders. So they focus so much on engaging the abs that round the shoulders. So the challenge is to do both. The challenge is to engage your core, okay, but while also maintaining a nice posture at the upper back. And that's why this is quite difficult, okay? So that's what I mean. So don't worry if you get frustrated practicing this, right? It takes time to master. So from there, you're just coming up and down, okay? So that there is the hip hinge. If you're doing it correctly, you should feel a stretch in at your hamstrings. And the objective is that once you're comfortable with that movement, let's pretend this is a bar with weight on it now, you then perform like stiff leg deadlifts, like so. Okay, so you would be coming up and down. So the next thing, so as I say, I'm not going to go into too much depth of these, just to give you a wee heads up of the sort of things you can practice. So get practicing that in the house. But as I just mentioned, the lumbar spine, when it comes to coming down, a lot of folks sometimes have a tendency to overcompensate the movement by sticking their backside out too far, and they end up arching the lower back. Okay, it's quite common, especially on Instagram. It is a really popular thing now on Instagram of like girls showing off their backside, and what they do is they sort of do that. They sort of it's like a duck pose. They stick their bum right out to make it appear bigger, or I don't know, more appealing. I'm not sure, it's some sort of mating call. But what they're actually doing is hyperextending the lower back. So whenever you see that pose, you've got to wonder if they're getting back pain. So you've got to make sure that you draw in your navel. So at the start of the lift, you're going to gently pull your hips into neutral by gently squeezing your glutes, okay? And that should, in most cases, that will automatically help a wee bit in engaging your ab muscles. So you're almost trying to like, see the glute complex in connection with your core, okay? So I mentioned it in the first video actually, during one of the exercises about not making sure the ribs don't flare. It's the same concept. So again, if you take your Instagram butt picture as an example, if the person's sticking their bum right out, what will happen is their ribs are going to flare out here, okay? So the objective, as I mentioned in that first video, is to engage the core, draw the ribs down. So by pulling the ribs down, automatically, again, usually the hips will come forward. So if you push the ribs down, the hips should come forward, which will engage the glutes. So and the final part of that jigsaw is that if you're focusing so much on this, you might end up doing this with your shoulders. So the final objective is to open that up. So you're trying to keep this engaged, while keeping a nice set scapula at the shoulder blades, okay, shoulders back and down we call it, okay. So that is the main three things that you need to try and sort of practice and learn, and it'll make a huge difference to the training experience because of deadlifts. The same sort of concept of hyperextension will apply to squats and other exercises as well. It will carry over into the running and the running drills, which we'll go over much later on. There's no point going into that in any great detail. So these are the things to think about. We don't do a lot of direct ab work in the sense of sit-ups, okay, because in most cases they're not really necessary and they're futile at best. But we do a little bit of something